The FPS genre is in a weird place right now. Every year, a new shooter pops up claiming it's the one that'll bring back the golden days, the one that'll finally fix FPS gaming. And every year, it flops. Ubisoft took their crack at it with XDefiant, a game designed to be everything COD fans have been begging for. No skill-based matchmaking, no bloated live service nonsense, just a classic arcade shooter. On paper, this should have been a win, but instead, it came and went like nobody even noticed. But XDefiant isn't just another shooter that didn't work, it's a perfect case study for why FPS games are struggling in general. We're stuck in a loop of nostalgia bait, half-baked launches, and live service burnout. So let's talk about it. Why XDefiant should have worked, why it didn't, and what that says about the future of FPS gaming. For years now, the FPS genre has been in a weird spot. Every new shooter either forces skill-based matchmaking to the point to where every match feels like a ranked game, launches with barely any content, or turns into another live service grind where progression matters more than the gameplay itself. And players have been getting louder about their dissatisfaction with this formula. This frustration isn't new, it's been building up over the years. Call of Duty players have been fighting skill-based matchmaking for what feels like a decade. Battlefield fans are still recovering from 2042's launch, Halo Infinite dropped with 2 maps in a dream, and every studio is either making a battle royale or a hero shooter because that's where the money is. So when Ubisoft came out and said, here's XDefiant, there's no skill-based matchmaking, it's classic FPS gameplay, and it's free, people actually paid attention. For once, it felt like a studio was listening. This wasn't another overcomplicated shooter trying to reinvent the wheel. It was just a solid arcade FPS built for players who missed how shooters used to feel. And for a while, it actually looked like it was gonna work. Playtests had solid feedback, streamers were hyping it up, and people started calling it the COD killer. Which, to be fair, happens every time a new FPS drops, but this time it actually held some weight to it. This wasn't another tactical shooter trying to be CS, or a battle royale fighting for a spot against Warzone or Apex. It was positioned to fill a gap in the market that a lot of players wanted filled. So how does a game that checks every box still end up flopping? Well, a few reasons, and none of them are good for the future of FPS games, to be quite honest. Let's start with the obvious. This is Ubisoft we're talking about. The same company that dropped Hyperscape, let it die, and then acted like it never happened. The same company that thought Ghost Recon Battle Royale was a good idea. Ubisoft doesn't exactly have the best track record when it comes to long-term FPS support, and XDefiant immediately ran into its own problems, the big one being delays. It was supposed to launch in summer 2023, but then it got pushed back because of compliance issues. Then it got delayed again. By the time it finally dropped, the hype window was gone. Most players had already moved on. And even when it finally launched, XDefiant ran into another problem. What was keeping people hooked? Because yeah, it played like an old school FPS, but was that enough? It didn't have the nostalgia of classic COD, it didn't have the polish of a AAA shooter, and it didn't have the content pipeline to keep people engaged long term. The harsh truth is that just being a classic FPS isn't enough anymore. We've seen this before. Splitgate was supposed to be Halo meets Portal, and that didn't survive. Even Halo Infinite itself couldn't keep its player base, and that game has decades of history behind it. And that's where we get to the real issue. The FPS genre is completely clogged up. If you want an arcade FPS, Call of Duty still dominates. If you want a competitive shooter, Valorant and CS2 have that locked down. And if you want a battle royale, you've got Warzone, maybe not for long, Apex, and then Fortnite is obviously the battle royale that everyone knows, although it's not an FPS. Even Halo Infinite is still trying to claw its way back into the conversation. So now let's think, where does a game like XDefiant fit? It's not really doing anything new, it's just doing old things better. And as much as players say they want the return of old school FPS games, history keeps proving that nostalgia alone doesn't keep a game alive. And that brings us to the bigger issue. XDefiant isn't just a one-off flop, it's part of a pattern that keeps repeating in the FPS genre. XDefiant flopping isn't just about Ubisoft, it's about the FPS genre being in a state where even a game that should succeed can't, and that's a problem. For the last decade, FPS games have been stuck in an identity crisis. First, it was hero shooters trying to be Overwatch. Then, it was every game trying to be a battle royale. Now, we're in this weird phase where nothing feels fresh anymore. Battlefield 2042 was supposed to bring Battlefield back until it dropped in an unfinished state. Halo Infinite was supposed to be Halo's big return until the content pipeline completely collapsed. Call of Duty has been cycling the same formula for years, throwing nostalgia skins in the store instead of fixing core gameplay. Every FPS just feels uninspired. And on top of that, everything is live service now. Devs don't launch finished games anymore. They launch content roadmaps and expect people to wait months for a game to actually feel complete, and people are getting tired of it. It's no surprise that when an FPS game actually drops complete on day one, players get excited. But that excitement doesn't last long because live service models have conditioned players to expect constant updates. And if a game doesn't deliver that, people move on fast. And here's the real kicker. Players always say they want a classic FPS experience, but every time a game actually tries to bring that back, it doesn't last. We've seen it before. Like I said, Splitgate had its moment, but the hype died. Halo Infinite had a nostalgia-driven launch, but the player base collapsed. Even Battlefield 2042, after fixing a lot of its issues, never fully recovered. There's a clear pattern here. Old-school FPS games don't survive in today's market. It's not just about bringing back classic FPS games anymore. The genre needs something new, but right now, no one's figured out what that is. At this point, it's not even about XDefiant anymore. It's about what's next. If even a game that gives players exactly what they wanted can't survive, what does that say about the future of FPS games? We've seen the same cycle happen over and over. Devs put out an FPS that feels like the old days. Players get excited, it pops off for a month, and then it dies. And the next time it happens, everyone acts surprised. At some point, just making an old school FPS isn't enough. The genre needs innovation, something that actually moves FPSs forward instead of just trying to recreate the past. But what does that even look like? Well, right now, I feel like the only real innovation we've seen in FPSs is extraction shooters, like Tarkov and DMZ. Games that actually change the way FPSs are played instead of just recycling the same old arcade or tactical formulas. I will say though, it is kind of like a battle royale, so it's not exactly the newest, but it's not what we've been getting. But even then, no one has figured out how to make that genre accessible enough for the mainstream. Tarkov is too hardcore and DMZ was half-baked. Maybe Bungie's Marathon will be the one, but I'm not holding my breath. Even the finals, which garnered a ton of hype, has struggled to hold its player base. And now, we don't even have to guess what happens next. XDefiant is officially shutting down in June. Ubisoft gave players exactly what they asked for, and it still couldn't survive in today's FPS market. If that doesn't prove how broken this genre is right now, I don't know what does. But this isn't just about XDefiant, this is about the FPS genre as a whole. If nothing changes, if developers keep either copying trends or keep banking on nostalgia, we're just going to continue the cycle. And with the insane rumor that Warzone may not be supported much longer, it's going to show that no one's safe from this downfall. FPS games aren't dead, but they sure as hell aren't striving either. XDefiant proved that even when a game checks all the right boxes, that doesn't guarantee success anymore. The market is oversaturated, innovation is rare, and live service models have conditioned players to move on the second a game stops updating fast enough. So where does that leave the genre? Are FPS games actually declining, or are players just harder to please than ever? And more importantly, what is the next big shooter supposed to look like? Because right now, no one seems to have an answer. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think FPS games are getting worse, or is this just another phase? Either way, if you enjoyed the video, let me know by dropping a like, and why not subscribe while you're at it? Unless you still think XDefiant was the future FPS, because then I don't know what to tell you. Once again, thank you guys so much for the support recently. It means the world to me, and I hope to see your guys' beautiful faces in the next video. Until then, it has been your boy Katana. Peace.